Okay, and welcome back, students who are taking Math for Business and Finance and Math Applications. We're working on the Chapter 6 drill problems, the odd number problems. And just as an FYI, this is the third time I'm actually recording this video, okay? Glitches and stuff like that. So just be patient and bear with me, all right? In the last video, we had finished on 6-31, so now we're on 6-33. Okay, and it's asking us to solve for the base, and it's round to the nearest hundredth as needed. Okay, so how do we get the base? Well, if I have my portion is equal to the rate times the base, and I want to isolate the base on one side of the equal sign, that means I have to divide both sides by the rate. And this way the rates will cancel out, and I'll be left with the base on one side of the equal sign. So that ends up being our formula. The base is equal to the portion over the rate. Okay. Now, let me do this. Okay, so to solve for this problem, 170 is 120% of. We take 170 and we're going to divide by 120%. Okay, so my portion is the 170 and my rate is the 120. Now, this is where I dislike using the portion and base concept because it's just not intuitive to me. Okay, like for example, in this case here, the portion, all right, and if you think about portion, you're talking, it seems to me that that would be a piece of, right? I mean, after all, that's what portion means. Well, if I'm thinking from the term of portion, and I think this is where a lot of students also can be somewhat a little confused, in that if my portion is 170, and if that's just a piece of the whole, and I want to call my whole the base, it would kind of make sense that the base would be a number that would be greater than the 170, right? I mean, because if that's just a portion of it, 170, that's only a piece of whatever is of a larger thing. Okay, but now here's the catch. Notice that it's the rate is 120%. Okay, and that's whenever you have a percentage that's greater than 100, that means that that base is actually going to be less than, okay, um, the 170. But this is why I don't really like using the portion and base and rate kind of concept, because of the implications of what the words mean. Okay, so as I had said in the past, I have a tendency to use more of common sense than anything, um, and I will be just trying to present it in terms of the base and portion and rate from the textbook. But like I said, I just prefer to use a little bit more common sense and figure things out that way. I mean, like I said, when I'm thinking about it, it's telling me here 170 is 120% of. Well, if this is 100% and this is 20 more percent, okay, so this is 120%. Now, this is telling me that this 120% is 170, okay? So that means, you know, um, if this is 120% of something else, the something else has to be, smaller than the 170, okay? Let me go over that again. I have 170 is 120%. Well, if this is 100% and that was 170, okay, that means it would be equal at 170, but it isn't. 170 is 20% more, okay, because it's saying is 120% of, so that's 20% more. So that means that because due to this extra 20%, that means it has to be, 170 is actually greater than whatever that number is, right? Because that number would be 100% plus the additional 20% to get me to 170. Right? So my answer here needs to be smaller, smaller than the 170. All right. So I mean that's the way I think about it in a common logical sense. Okay. And again, like I said, I disagree. I don't like the terminology portion and base because of the connotations. But be it as it may, all right, we have 170, and that's over 120%. Why am I dividing by 120%? Well, remember, when I'm going to divide by a number greater than the 100%, that's going to give me a smaller answer. Okay, if I had, say, 170 times 80%, okay, 170 times, I'm sorry, 170 divided by 0.8, I'm going to end up with a number that's larger than 170. All right, let's look at it from this perspective. Here's my 170, and let's say I'm multiplying by, I'm sorry, I am dividing by 80%. Okay, I end up with 212.50 because, right, the 80%, 170 is 80%, draw my circle. This 80%, all right, is equal to 170. Well, when I divide by the 80%, that means in order to get the entire amount here, it has to be greater than 170. But when I'm dividing by a number greater than 100%, like in this particular case, I'm going to end up with a number that's smaller. So we convert I hope you understood that. If not, rewind and watch it again. So I have 120%, and to convert it into a decimal, I move the decimal place over 2. So I end up with 1.2. And I take my 170 and divide it by 1.2. And when I do the math for that, I end up with 141.6666 onto infinity. And since I need to round to the nearest hundredth, this is my hundredths place right here. So I have 141.6. And I look to the right, and that's 6, so that's greater than 5, so that means I round up. So I round up to 0.67. My answer is 141.67. Okay, I hope you understood that, or at least my thinking about it, the way I think about it. Do whatever's right for you, okay? But I just intuitively think about things. I use common sense in order to arrive at my solutions. All right, 6-35. Okay, solve for the base. This is the same as before, so I only, might as well, I know the pattern, right? 0.5%. Remember, base is equal to portion over the rate. Convert my 0.5 into a decimal. So I move the decimal place over 2, 0.005. Divide 50 by 0.005. And when I punch that into a calculator, I get 10,000 as my final answer. Okay, remember the K represents 10 and then 3 more zeros. Okay? All right, so that's 635. Let's do 6-37 because that is also a base problem. And then I'll stop the video and move on to the next, and move on to doing the rates and the next set of problems. So I have 800 divided by 4.5%. Okay, so in the previous problem we had a decimal as a number. Now we have a fraction. So I have to convert the 4.5% into a decimal. Now remember, the half is a part of a whole. Okay, so I take 1 and divide it by 2, and we end up with 0.5, right? So that means my fraction is now 4.5%. Okay, let me just rewrite that a little bit in a different space. So we end up with 4.5%. Move the decimal place over 2 places. So I have 0.045. And now I can rewrite my initial equation of 800 divided by 0.045 because I converted the mixed fraction into a decimal. And I end up with, let's see here, I end up with 17,777.7777, which goes on forever. So again, this is my hundredths because I'm rounding to the nearest hundredth. So I have 17,777.7. All right, since that my 7 is in the hundredths and I look to the right and that's a 7 greater than 5, so I round up and I end up with 78 as my final answer. Okay, so that takes care of the base. Let's move on in the next video to the rate.